Today, we are unpacking a stack of sources about a feat of athletic perfection so utterly complete that it will likely, never happen again.
It's a phenomenal case study. We're looking at the story of Mejiro Ramonu, a Japanese racehorse who, in the 1980s, didn't just win her sport's ultimate prize, the Triple Tiara.
She achieved a perfect triple tiara.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because to understand the absolute madness of this perfect run, we have to look at the genetic collision that created Mejiro Ramonu in 1983.
Her origin story is wild.
Yeah, her sire was a horse named Mogami, and her dam was Mejiro Hiryu. And from what I'm reading, Mogami was not exactly passing down the easiest trades.
That is putting it very mildly. In the breeding world at that time, Mogami's offspring carried a very distinct, notorious reputation.
I mean, they were known for being pretty volatile.
Volatile and, honestly, somewhat unattractive physically. They were not built with elegant frames. They were functional, but often quite coarse.
But then Ramona was born, and she physically defies the odds right out of the gate. She's this stunning dark bay filly.
Oh, absolutely gorgeous.
Right, with this incredibly elegant frame and charming face. The sources say she is still considered one of the most beautiful horses in racing history. So physically, she escapes the Mogami curse.
But internally, she inherited every single ounce of that volatility. But Ramonu's raw physical horsepower was so overwhelming that she could occasionally just brute force her way through her own physiological depletion.
We see this immediately when she debuts in October of her 2-year-old season. It's a 1,400-meter dirt race, and she doesn't just win.
She obliterates the field.
Yeah, by nearly 20 lengths.
Which is an absurd, jaw-dropping margin. But that raw talent was a double-edged sword. She proved she had the engine, but she hadn't learned how to steer.
Right, because in her very next race, she burns her reserves before the race begins, and she spins out, finishing 4th in a relatively small field.
Which makes her bounce back at the Ferry Stakes so fascinating. She enters, completely redeems herself, and clocks a 1:34 range time.
The sources make a huge point to highlight that this time wasn't just good for a filly. She was rivaling the elite colts of her generation.
People were instantly comparing her to the legendary Maruzensky.
And that single performance crowns her the best 2-year-old filly.
It firmly established her ceiling. Everyone looking at the data knew she possessed generational speed.
But sheer speed doesn't win a grueling multi-race campaign.
Exactly. As she matured physically into her 3-year-old season, the physical demands of the races increased, which just compounded her genetic anxiety.
So the core question shifted from, how fast is she, to how do you systematically manage the psychology of a brilliant, volatile animal?
And their initial answer to that question was pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, she kicks off her crucial 3-year-old season by losing the Queen Cup.
And the sources explicitly state why. She got completely overwhelmed by her own excitement before the race. The nerves took over again.
So this loss is the major inflection point in her narrative. The management team realizes that hoping she wakes up calm on race day
is not a strategy at all. They needed a catalyst, a fundamental intervention in how she processed the racing environment.
So they make a massive tactical pivot and switch her jockey to Hiroshi Kawachi. I want to dig into this because the change is instantaneous.
It really is night and day.
Kawachi gets in the saddle, and they enter the fillies review, which is the trial race for the first leg of the Triple Tiara. Under Kawachi, Ramonu executes this dramatic, sweeping run from way behind the pack to win decisively.
A textbook come-from-behind victory.
Right. But then they go into the Oka show, the actual first leg of the Triple Tiara, and they do a complete 180.
It's a total reversal.
Instead of closing from the back, she races right up at the front, dictates the pace, and wins her first tiara. I'm looking at this tactic change, and it seems like absolute madness.
It does seem crazy.
You have an already volatile horse. Isn't it incredibly risky to completely change a horse's winning strategy, coming from behind to racing at the front right before the biggest race of her career?
It looks like madness on paper, but it's actually a masterclass in biomechanics and interspecies communication.
Absolutely.
Well, in racing, most horses are heavily conditioned into a single running style because it's what makes them feel safe. A closer feels secure hiding in the herd before making a run. A front runner feels secure avoiding the claustrophobia of the pack.
Okay, that makes sense.
So to ask a nervous prey animal to suddenly abandon her preferred safety mechanism and run exposed at the front requires overriding her deepest survival instincts.
So Kawachi isn't just steering her, he's actively managing her threat response in real time.
Precisely. Through the subtle tension on the bit, weight distribution in the saddle, and finding a calming rhythm, Kawachi communicated to Ramonu that she was safe at the front.
He essentially outsmarted the field.
He recognized that the pace dynamics of the Oka show were entirely different from the trial race. If they had stayed in the back, they would have been trapped behind a wall of horses.
Wow.
He asked this high-strung animal to step entirely out of her comfort zone, and she trusted him enough to do it. That tactical versatility is what separates good athletes from legends.
Okay, so they secure the first tiara through sheer tactical brilliance. But the sources show that immediately after this, the team realizes they are walking into a massive psychological trap.
The Oka show is done, but the upcoming Oaks, the second leg of the tiara, is held at the Tokyo racecourse.
And the Tokyo racecourse happens to be the exact venue where Ramonu suffered both of her career losses. They boldly enter her in the Flora Stakes, a trial race at that very track just weeks before the Oaks.
It's a highly unorthodox psychological overwrite. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows the team wasn't just managing her physical condition.
They were actively managing her mental hurdles.
Right. They knew if she stepped onto the Tokyo track for the Oaks carrying the trauma of her past failures, the Mogami nerves would instantly surface.
So by running her in the Flora Stakes, they were intentionally exposing her to the trigger environment.
Exactly, under Kawachi's calming influence, to replace the trauma with a dominant, positive experience.
And the execution is flawless.
Yeah.
She dominates the Flora Stakes. She beats formidable contenders like Dyna Actress with ease.
She effectively exorcises the ghost of Tokyo.
So when the actual Oaks arise, the panic is gone. She enters the final stretch, takes the lead early, and wins with absolute authority. That secures the second tiara.
A huge triumph.
But, reading through the rest of the campaign, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can't just run a horse through psychological warfare and extra races without a physical cost.
You absolutely cannot. Every physiological peak has a corresponding valley. As the campaign stretched into the autumn, the cellular fatigue, the accumulation of microtears, and the sheer metabolic cost of holding peak form for an entire year began to break her down.
This is where the tension in these sources really ratchets up. We were heading toward the Queen Elizabeth II Cup, which was the third and final leg of the Triple TR at the time.
And to get there, she runs the trial race, the Rose Stakes.
She wins it, but the margin is razor thin. And then her trainer publicly admits a detail that is frankly shocking. Heading into the most important race of her life, Ramonu is only operating at 70% condition.
She is completely running on fumes.
Which is a terrifying prospect in this sport. I mean, to complete a triple tiara, a horse has to peak biologically 3 separate times across a calendar year.
Right, over varying distances against fresh horses whose entire seasons are calibrated just to beat you on that specific day.
Trying to hold off the elite tier of Japanese racing when your lactic acid clearance rates are dropping and your muscles are fatigued is a monumental task.
It really is.
But let's be real for a second. If she's genuinely only at 70%, why even risk it? I mean, in modern sports, if a star player is at 70%, they are benched to prevent injury. Was this reckless?
Well, by the metrics of modern sports science, it is highly questionable. But we have to look at this through the lens of 1980s racing philosophy.
They were going for broke.
The trainer and owner were staring down immortality. There is a deep-seated belief in racing that great horses find a way. True, all-time legends find reserves of courage that completely defy their physical conditioning.
The team wasn't managing her for longevity at that point. They were risking everything for the sake of a complete, perfect record.
And that willingness to risk it all is exactly what cements her legacy.
And somehow she delivers. In the Queen Elizabeth II Cup, despite the exhaustion, despite the massive target on her back, she pushes to the front early.
The entire field comes after her, chasing her down the stretch.
But she absolutely refuses to yield. She holds on and makes history as the first filly to complete the Triple Tiara.
But we have to emphasize the sheer scale of the record here. It wasn't just the 3 main championship races.
Right.
The perfect Triple Tiara means she won the Oka Show, the Oaks, the Queen Elizabeth II Cup, and all 3 of their respective trial races.
That is 6 consecutive graded stakes victories. An unbroken chain through the most grueling gauntlet the sport has to offer.
It meant she had to be perfect on the qualifying days when she wasn't fully cranked up, and perfect on the championship days when the pressure was at its absolute highest.
But despite this monumental peak, the sources outline an ending to her story that feels incredibly bittersweet. She achieves perfection, but she doesn't get to ride off into the sunset gracefully.
No, the reality of the sport eventually caught up with her. Later that year, they entered her in the Arima Kinnan, the year-end all-star race against the best older horses and males.
She went in as the second favorite, right?
She did. In the final stretch, she got completely trapped behind a wall of horses, lost all her momentum, and finished ninth.
It's such an anticlimactic end. It wasn't a failure of her heart or her talent. It was just the chaotic luck of traffic.
And the collateral damage of that single unlucky race was massive.
Yeah, because of that ninth-place finish, she is denied the title of Horse of the Year. That honor went to Dinah Gulliver, who won the Derby and the Arima Kinnan.
And right after that, at the owner's request, her racing career is abruptly over. She retires.
It was like a supernova, this blinding, terrifyingly fast peak, and then it was just gone.
And her complex post-racing life adds another layer to her legacy. She entered the breeding shed, and the entire industry expected her to produce a dynasty of champions.
But biology, as we discussed, is stubborn.
Very stubborn. That volatile temperament associated with her sire, Mogami, came roaring back in her offspring.
Her foals inherited the intense nervousness and the anxiety, but crucially, they didn't inherit her freakish physical talent to override it.
They got the 8,000 RPM engine, but not the chassis to handle it.
Though her bloodline does survive in the modern era, right?
It does. The sources note she is in the pedigree of Glory Vase, who was a phenomenal horse that won the Hong Kong Vase multiple times. She eventually passed away in 2005 at the age of 22.
But stepping back from her biography, the sources make a fascinating point about what this perfect run means in today's context. Specifically, they stress that attempting to run in all the trial races between the classics is fundamentally unthinkable now.
It is entirely outside the realm of modern best practices. Today's sports science is built heavily on schedule management and risk minimization.
So a top-tier horse today will run maybe one prep race before a championship.
If that. Increasingly, trainers will skip the trials entirely, opting to train the horse up to the main event in a controlled environment to minimize physiological stress.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.